From Square 2, this is What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO at Square 2, and along with my longtime friend Eric Kalis and co-founder at Square 2 and six-time entrepreneur, Eric and I will answer the questions CEOs have every single day: what's wrong with revenue? You can be part of the livecast show where we'll answer your questions every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, or catch the show on demand on YouTube and on all your favorite podcast networks. Also, check out all our audio and video content on Square 2 Plus at the square2marketing.com website. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 11 of What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO and Chief Revenue Scientist here at Square 2. Today we're talking about how do you know how to prioritize what to work on. One of the things that we found keeps revenue from growing is that people sometimes aren't sure what to work on, in what order, and how to prioritize everything that's on their plate. Today I'm joined by Kristen Stricker, COO and Director of Client Services here at Square 2. Kristen, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
And you probably noticed, but this is not a live broadcast today due to some scheduling conflicts this afternoon. We're pre-recording the show in the morning on Wednesday, and the show will be launched live at 4 o'clock. So if you did want to pick up the show at our normal time, you will be able to still get it on all of its regular channels: YouTube, our website. The podcasts will be released on their podcast platform of your choice. So for the most part, it should be a normal show for most of you. And we have collected questions, so we'll do question and answers like we normally do. If you are interested in subscribing to the show, you can subscribe via YouTube at the Square 2 Marketing YouTube channel. And you can also go to our website. At the bottom of square2marketing.com, there's a footer called What's Wrong with Revenue. Click it, and you will find a page where you can submit questions, subscribe to get updates on the show. And actually, all the shows are posted there as well. So there's lots of ways to get access to the show if you're interested. So, Kristen, let's get into it. We talk to a lot of companies, and a lot of their challenges come down to there's so much to do and so little time. Last episode, we talked about resources and having the right resources. I feel like sometimes people are working on the wrong things in the wrong order. And how can we help them decide what to work on and in what order to work on it? For instance, do I start with sales? Do I start with marketing? Do I start with customer service? Do I work on a big campaign initiative? Do I work on optimization? I mean, how would somebody know where to start from a prioritization perspective? So, Kristen, why don't you enlighten our audience a little bit in terms of how Square 2 thinks about prioritization, and then I'll introduce a couple of other concepts, and then we'll handle questions. Since we do have a lot of questions, I want to get to them, but maybe you could kind of just introduce everybody to how we think about prioritization.
Sure. So out of the gate, two main things that you have to think about. Where is the business in terms of the maturity of the business? Such as you have a robust pipeline, but we're not closing deals. Versus we have a robust database and we've been doing business with a lot of people for a long time, and we're adding new offerings to our services, and we need to find a way to make sure that we increase awareness. Versus you're a startup, right? And you have to build a base out of the gate. And then also your objectives. What are the business, your overall business objectives and goals for the year and the next 3 years? So those two things combined together will then start to help you dig through where should we start and what are our priorities.
Awesome. So let's get a little into it in more detail, right? So you talked about, we have a lot, the marketing seems to be working, but we can't close as many deals as we want to. So if someone was telling you that, where would that kind of suggest you point the rifle in terms of prioritizing what they might be wanting to work on?
So that kind of puts me in sales enablement and sales, right? So let's do a little bit of our due diligence and look, do you have a sales process? Is it being followed? What does the close rate look like? Do you have any transparency into what's going on in the sales process? Also, kind of the lead management, right? Between marketing and sales, what's going on there? Is it a handoff? Is our marketing leads being appropriately handed off to sales, and are sales handling those leads correctly? And do we have communication between marketing and sales? Is marketing handing sales the right kind of leads in the first place? So once we've kind of done a bit of due diligence here in terms of what is going on in these two areas, we can start to understand what is, if you will, the low hanging fruit. What are the things that we need to start working on, tweaking, improving out of the gate to help with that scenario?
Awesome. So let's say you do your due diligence and you find that there is a sales process and people are more or less following it, and the handoff is okay, and there's data on the lead. So there's some transparency, decent transparency, let's say. But we're still just not able to close as many as we would like. Where would that direct you?
So if there is transparency and things are being handed off correctly, and the sales has deemed, yep, that marketing is handing us some qualified leads, then we need to look at the sales process and what is the sales team doing to make sure that that process is consistent, that it is also has consistency with the voice, the message of what prospects heard during the marketing cycle, right? Journey. And making sure that they have the appropriate tools to close deals and that they're taking the right steps to push that along.
Right. So I might even take it a step further and say, like, maybe we really ought to look at what's happening at the very end of the sales process. So if there's a decent sales process and there's transparency and the handoff is okay, I would probably dig in very specifically at the end of the sales process. So if there's a presentation that you're doing, if there's a proposal that you're providing, if there's an agreement that you're sending along to your prospects, there's a high likelihood that those could be preventing you, and you might not even know it, from closing deals at a higher rate, right? Your contract could be too legal. If we go back to some of the other things we said in previous episodes, your whole sales process has to be designed to get your prospects to feel safe with you. And if you give them a legal contract and your decision maker is not a lawyer, that's actually producing the opposite effect. They're actually going to be quite anxious. They're going to look at a document. They're not going to understand it. The first thing they're going to say is, well, I got to send this to legal. Now your sales cycle is extended weeks, if not longer, as legal pours through your contract and redlines it, sends it back to you, because after all, that's what legal's there for, to protect the company and to redline stuff and to make this as much in their favor as possible. If you had delivered an agreement or a contract that was written in plain English and your business champion understood it, they may have signed it without having to send it to legal. So that's one very practical example. Your presentation may be all about you and not about the prospect, right? So again, you're not really addressing their issues. You're not really focusing on them. You're talking more about yourself. That might be preventing you from closing deals too. And the only reason I'm really drilling down onto these specific things is because when you want to prioritize what you're going to work on, you really want to look at what's going to have the biggest impact for the least amount of effort. And when you're looking at a big impact, a great place to start is at the very end of the buyer journey at the close rate. If your close rate is not between 70 and 80, maybe even pushing 90%, then I think that's a very good place to start. That's a place where you will have big impact for little effort. If you look at the sales presentation that all your reps are using and you realize that it's 90% about you and 10% about your prospect, and you were to flip that to make it 90% about the prospect and 10% about you, you might find that you take your close rate from 30% to 50% in just a matter of days. I mean, that's the kind of impact we're looking for. And that's the kind of prioritization methodology that I think we'd like you to take away today. Narrow in on those areas that you can have a big impact on for not amount of effort. right? So we talked about sales. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. So Kristen, tell the audience what some examples of marketing oriented work that might have a big impact for a little bit of effort.
Right. So from a marketing perspective, again, you want to dig in and do some due diligence in terms of what does your business really need right now. Big impact for little effort out of the gate. If you're really looking to increase awareness, you don't have the awareness that you ultimately need. There are two sides of that, right? There's going to be the long-term play, and then there's going to be the short-term play. Long-term play meaning building the brand, building domain authority out in the digital space, making sure that you're getting found and searched for. But then the quicker impact, the quick wins, you can start to push the message out there actively using things such as paid channels, tapping into things such as associations, publications of your target prospects, where you're going to be communicating to them through a channel that they trust, right? From anywhere from that to, if you are a more mature business and you do have a wide database, you have a solid database that you can communicate to, and you have something to communicate to them, you have cross-sell, upsell opportunities from a marketing perspective, start communicating there. Start to raise awareness and increase engagement with the people that already know you and are a bit warm, if you will.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Another option would be if you do have some performance already. For instance, if you are getting people to your website and you have some highly trafficked landing pages that maybe aren't converting in the 40 to 50% range. Remember, a landing page is a very specific page with a very specific task, and that's to turn a visitor into a conversion, a lead, or a sales opportunity. And those pages should be converting at a pretty high clip. If they're not, that could be a very good place to start with a little bit of effort and a high return. So if you do have a highly trafficked landing page with a low conversion rate, and that should be pretty easy to find, making some simple adjustments to that page could provide big results. For instance, lots of times marketers tend to use the headline for the fancy creative story and the subhead for the more practical application of what they're actually going to get if they convert on this page. Lots of times we'll flip that and have the more practical as the headline and the more creative as the subhead. That's a 5-minute flip that could potentially increase the conversion rates significantly, right? Sometimes we add a testimonial to the landing page, which might seem a little counterintuitive. Testimonials are generally about the company or the products or services, but we might add a testimonial about the particular offer we're providing or the particular content that the page is trying to convert for. That is, again, a very simple, quick fix add to the landing page, can potentially drive up the conversion rate. You could swap out the picture. You could shorten the copy. You could look at the form and make some adjustments to the form. You could make your text, instead of paragraphs, into bullets. These are all really short, simple upgrades that you can run on a high traffic landing page that would produce an improved set of results. So again, if you're looking at all of the things you have to do, you want to make sure that you put this stuff in your list of things to do first, because that's going to take a little bit of effort. You're going to be able to get a lot of those in and have a big impact on results before you start looking at some of the bigger, more costly items from a time and an expense perspective. Now, we are going to talk a little bit of how to balance that, because obviously you can't not do the big items, because those are important too, but it's just a question of where do I start and how do I balance that? So we're going to talk about that balance a little bit. Kristen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the only other thing, there's steps, right, to the small stuff, to the big stuff. A lot of what you just discussed are the smaller tweaks that you can make very easily and quickly. And then there's the in between. If you have content, if you have a resource library that you're already working with, evaluate that. Evaluate blog posts. Can you throw together a pillar page? I say throw together, but strategically put together a pillar page that's going to present content that you already have that maybe you can just tweak a little bit. That's going to give you a boost in SEO. That's going to give you something interesting to push out to your audience and have them engage with in a slightly different way. So take a look at what you already have and what can you tweak there and how can you use it in different ways.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Reallocating assets is another really good low effort way that can potentially have a high impact, right? You may have a marketing asset that's not highly downloaded, that if you turn it over to sales and they can use it in the sales process, you just gave them a brand new tool without having to do any extra work. So I think looking at the buyer journey and looking at where your assets are deployed and making sure they're deployed efficiently is another area that can have a big impact for not a lot of effort. So I got a question here, and it talks about balance. So keeping some good threads here in the show. The question came from Mark in Portland. You mentioned little projects have a big impact versus bigger projects that might also have a big impact. How would you recommend we balance the workload for these two types of projects? So this is kind of what I was alluding to. Like if you're going to run a campaign, and there's a lot of lift associated with the campaign, you can't just ignore it because you have all these little things to do that are going to also have a big impact. You eventually got to get to the campaign, and that campaign might have a lot to it, right? You might have to write a series of emails. You might have to create some content. You might have to do some list segmentation, some personalization to content you already have. You may have a partner involved in a campaign. So there are going to be you may need special pages created for the campaign. So there's a pretty big lift associated with almost any campaign you're planning on launching. So how would you balance that out with these little activities? And Kristen, what I'd like you to talk a little bit about is how we do some of our planning, because the way we do planning with clients, I think, is a really good model for how clients can do planning on their own. And there's some similarities, believe it or not, to what the agency goes through and what the in-house team goes through. First, both of us have limited resources, right? So it might look like an agency has unlimited resources because they have all these people that work there, and the in-house team might be 1 or 2 or 3 people, but it's really the same kind of exercise. So if you have a couple of people on your marketing team, they only can work a certain amount of hours on a certain amount of days, which means there's limits to what they can get done in a month. It's the same thing with an agency. Most of our clients have a budget. We like to try to stick to their budget. And that means that we can only do a certain amount of work for them over a certain period of time. And we work with the client to prioritize that work, to recommend work that's going to have a high impact and a big lift on their program. But in the end, we can't do as much as we want or as much as they want us to do. There are constraints to that. So I think the way we plan is a good model for in-house people to plan also. So Kristen, can you talk a little bit about how we look at the available resources or the budget and then decide what we think a client should be working on, how we collaborate with them and discuss the priorities and get their feedback and sign off, and then have everyone on the same page to then start executing? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Okay. So from the top, always making sure that your business goals and objectives are front and center. I mean, we talked about that as that number one thing that you're going to look at to help you decide where you're going to start. But on an ongoing basis, it is very important to keep that front and center so that you don't lose the connection between what you're doing in marketing and sales to what your ultimate business goals and objectives are. There are always a whole bunch of bright, shiny objects out there that can distract us. And by making sure that you have a format where that is always there, and that as you discuss what you're going to focus on, that there is a way to make a direct connection between marketing, sales, and business goals and objectives.
Yeah, let me just make a quick point there, because I think that's a good point you bring up when you're talking about in-house teams that may tend to have to respond to the whims of the leadership group or the CEO. So, how do you handle, hey, we have a plan, we're executing this plan, and all of a sudden someone says, hey, I want to do this other thing that you weren't planning on doing. How keeping your objectives and goals in mind, how would someone respond to that if that came up?
Okay, so there are a couple things there. So you have this plan, leadership, something else comes up and they want you to focus here. So you can spend some time to do a bit of due diligence to map out what it's going to take to do that thing, right? And look at the path that you are on. Map out also the enemy of marketing, in my opinion, too, is dilution, right? So by spreading yourself thin here and by splintering your efforts, you're going to start to experience dilution in your efforts. And all of a sudden, you're going to be doing a little bit here on this campaign, the direction that you'd already been going, and a little bit here on this new direction, and you're not going to see any great results across the board. And then everybody's going to be frustrated and disappointed with the efforts involved. And so I think you need to have a way to realistically map out what it's going to take to do this effort, to do this new effort, to continue to build upon the effort that you've already been building. And you need to put in a tangible way how this is going to impact what you have been doing, right? And if the leadership team or whoever wants all things to be done, then you also need to map out, okay, if that's going to be the case, we need X number of people, we need X number of budget. You need to put budget, people, man hours around these efforts as well, so that it becomes a more black and white conversation around where the focus should be. And it becomes a very easy way to then start to go through and prioritize.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think to boil that down, I would say something like, we can do that. What would you like us to not be working on? Right. So if we plan properly and we plan collaboratively, then, you should be able to go back and say to the CEO, like, look, this is what we agreed we were working on. This is what we're working on. So you want to do this other thing. It's great. Which of these items should we push to next month? Right. And to Kristen's point, if the answer is, well, nothing, I want it all to get done. Well, then the question has to be, well, I need you to allocate some additional resources, right? I need a part-time person. I need to hire an agency. I need, to hire another full-time person because, when we agreed to this plan, it was with our existing resources and our existing budget. You've added to the plan. It seems reasonable to add to our existing resources or our existing budget. And if not, then let's just go through the list and see what the least priority is. There's always a low priority, right? If you have to stack rank the 10 things you're working on, there's always going to be something in the 10th spot. So if someone wants to add something else, maybe that 10th item is really not that important. Maybe that could wait a month or two. So that I think is a very handy thought process in which you can help keep senior leadership focused. In some cases, the answer might be like, you know what, all the things that we had agreed to a couple of weeks ago are still priorities. Let's make this new idea I had. Let's work on that next month, which, by the way, is exactly the response you want to get. You want to try to stay focused. To Kristen's point, you don't want to dilute your efforts. You want to put enough effort behind the stuff that you're already planning on executing. So moving a great idea that wasn't planned to the parking lot and looking at it in an upcoming month seems to me like a perfectly good response to something like that. You're not blowing it off. You're not dismissing it. You're just saying like, yeah, let's get it in the plan next month because this month has been planned and is full. And we all agree we like the plan. So that also makes good sense to me. All right. So go ahead.
Sorry, just one comment too. Monthly plans, and that's great, and you should be able to be agile month to month. But also, you may want to push to the next quarter. So if you're able to kind of map out and determine and define budgets and people that are going to be needed, put it as a quarterly initiative so that you can be focused right in the quarter and not be constantly shifting from one thing to the next, and that you can do something well.
Yeah, I mean, shifting also drives a lot of inefficiencies. So if you have people starting and stopping, if you have people who worked on a project for 2 weeks and then you pull them off and put them on a new project, that's really inefficient. When they do come back to that other project, they're going to basically have to start, again to get kind of centered around it. So, one of the things we would recommend to anybody listening or watching this is try to minimize that, because that can be a real detriment to the team. You're not optimizing your resources if you have them hopping around from project to project, or you're pulling them off of things to get started on new things. So the smoother you can do your planning and the less disruptive you can be around what they're working on, that's a very positive takeaway from the show today. Now, Kristen, you mentioned it a couple of times, so just to keep us kind of moving in the right direction, I have a question here. How would you recommend we plan our month? Is it as simple as hours available across our team and estimates for all the work that needs to be done? I mean, is that really how easy it is?
It's certainly part of the equation, right? So, but you do want to make sure that you're mapping out everything that you ideally want to accomplish. Like, what is it going to take to help you reach your goals and objectives, and mapping that out. Once you have that all mapped out, and again, considering that you have a combination of hours with team members as well as budgets available, you want to start to take a look at, as we already discussed, priority, but collaboration. How can you collaborate with your internal team, people that you might have access to, freelance contractors that you might have developed partnerships with, agencies, and then start to determine, again, what's going to deliver the biggest impact within this period of time? Where are we going to be most valuable with our time? And where may other people that we partner with bring the most value? So looking at it from that lens can be very helpful and can help you leverage everything that you have. And if you are allocating people right and correctly and tapping into the strengths of your people as well as your partners, you can get a lot more done within that month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. Now, we also kind of mentioned the A word a few minutes back, agile. And I know that that's, I guess, a little bit of a buzzword. It's probably more popular with agencies, but I do know some in-house teams that practice agile for their marketing also. So I'll define it a little bit for our audience, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about how it can be used to create a very efficient execution to marketing primarily. I mean, I think it probably could be used for sales work and customer service work too, but I generally feel like marketing has a bigger lift every single month from a delivery perspective, and maybe agile is a little more suited for the people who are producing that kind of stuff. So just to explain to everybody what agile is. So agile is a methodology that the software space created to develop new software. And it really came out of the situation where previous to agile, software companies would get their engineers in a room and they would spend years building something, and then they would take it to market and hope it was what everybody wanted it to be. It was like the perfect was much more important than done. And a lot of software companies found that even when they rolled out products that were better than what was in the market was already connected to the product that was a lesser product, and it was impossible to get them to move. So they started looking at the way they develop software and made it more customer centric, and they made it more about delivering products sooner and a constant iteration that went with that product. So instead of waiting a year to release the product, they would release it in a couple of weeks, and they knew it wasn't perfect, but they would get feedback from the customers and they would make fixes to it. And then they would release another version a couple of weeks later. And they were basically releasing versions on a regular schedule with upgrades that they got direct from customer feedback. And it gave them a much faster go to market. It engaged the customer in the upgrades and features that they wanted. And it got them to a highly functional product with customer acceptance in a much shorter time frame. And they were able to actually beat some bigger competitors to market as well. So almost all software today gets developed agilely with Scrum methodology, where there's a set of features that everybody agrees to. They work on those features. The customer is intimate with the features that are being delivered. The product gets launched, they get feedback, they quickly iterate on it, and they just keep going, constantly adding new features and updating features and fixing things, prioritizing the things that need to get done on a very short window. And it produces a really nice rhythm and a really nice cycle to get a high velocity of stuff done in a short amount of time. Marketing has kind of adopted a similar approach probably over the past 6 or 7 years, where instead of delivering, as an example, a website that we spent 6 months or longer working on, and it's now perfect, and we launch it, in a lot of cases, we'll now launch smaller websites, start to get feedback on the performance of the site, and then continue to work on that site over time. And it's called growth-driven design, where we're getting direct feedback from users and using that feedback to prioritize fixes, updates, and additions to the site. So over time, the site grows, but it grows based on real customer data and interactions, not what the company thinks it should look like, or the company thinks it should be doing, or the marketing people think it should be doing, but really what the customers and clients are telling you they need from the site, or the way they want the site to work. And that approach has kind of dripped into a lot of what we do from a marketing perspective. So, we no longer do a 12-month marketing plan. Like before Square 2, when I was the VP of marketing in a software company, every year around this time, I did a 12-month marketing plan, presented it to everybody, got buy-in to the budget and the details. And, everyone thought it was great. A couple months into the year, I was changing it already. And when we started doing those kinds of plans at Square 2 18 years ago, today we don't do, and I don't know who does 12-month marketing plans anymore, because it's kind of a waste of time. What you really should be doing is coming up with a rhythm and a cycle to your planning that allows you to be more responsive or more agile. So again, if you're doing a quarterly plan, like Kristen said, 4 times a year, and you're then breaking that quarterly plan down into 3 30-day sprints, and you're going to respond in those 30-day sprints to what you learned in the previous month, you're now taking an agile approach to how you plan and deploy your marketing. Now, when it comes to prioritization and estimating and balancing, which is what kind of got us onto this jag here, by including the people who are going to do the work in your planning exercise, you'll get a much better idea of what they're capable of doing. And you'll be able to find some efficiencies in that planning, as opposed to, a VP of marketing or a CMO or even a CEO sitting down and saying like, okay, here's what I want to do this month. Here you go, marketing people, go do it, without their input. You're probably going to have a less efficient set of execution associated with that plan. You don't have their buy-in, so maybe they can do it, maybe they can't. You're going to have a lot of inefficiencies as they come back to you and say like, look, we're not sure what you meant by this. And, we're not sure we can get this done. It would have been a much more efficient process to sit down with the people who have to do the work and start mapping out the month. And again, this is where you can balance big stuff like campaign planning or campaign execution with little stuff like optimization, and look at that package of work and say to the people responsible for doing it, can you do all this in this next 30 days? They say yes, you got their buy-in. They say no, well, now you have to look at priorities again and see what maybe has to get pushed it back into the next month. And that rhythm of collaborating on that every single month, agreeing to what can get done, is a much more efficient process. You're going to have everyone kind of pulling in the right direction. You're going to have everyone in agreement. Leadership team understands, the execution people understand. You can blend, if you need marketing to help with sales, if you need marketing to help with customer service, you can blend all that together into your package of work and get everyone on the same page about what it's going to take to deliver it. So that's how agile and kind of the rhythms associated with the month is probably going to be the best way to kind of weave that prioritization and those conversations into your regular day-to-day and keep everything very efficient. Kristen, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I just want to put one caveat out there in terms of agile, and I think a trap that many people fall into when it comes to agile, using the terminology agile, trying to implement, and marketing in general. And that is, again, the dilution of efforts of, oh, we're agile, so we can pull this out, we can put this in because somebody requested this, and now this is a priority, and we're going to shift everything around. Sure, you can. Everything that Mike just talked about, the collaboration of the team and the ability, it gives you the ability to do that, but it's not doing yourselves any favors. Again, the intention of being agile with your marketing initiatives is the opportunity to iterate based on results, right? So based on, you've decided that this is your direction, that this is your goal, this is your initiative. You're going to do something quickly so that you can get it out there and that you can start to analyze and you can start to see the effectiveness of it. And then the agile part comes in and allows you to tweak and iterate on that to constantly improve. It is not meant to tear your plans apart every single month, throw out the quarterly plan, and go a complete direction. You're wasting efforts, you're wasting time. It's just, that is a trap. Mike, we've been doing this for 7 years now, the agile methodology.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that happen so many times. And that is a trap that really takes away all of the benefits of agile.
I think that's a really good point and something to be careful of. And Kristen also brings up a good point that agile really it was originally designed and should be used to help you respond to the performance of the program and the data you're collecting. Just like in the software space, it's designed to respond to customer feedback and usage data. It really should be the same way here too. If you have a program that is not responding, then you should take that data and work on getting it to respond. Now, if you've been working on it for 3 months and you can't get it to respond, then maybe you want to shutter it. But I do think those cycles give you the opportunity to look at what's working, double down on what's working, look at what's not working as well, try to fix it, and then look at those things that you've been trying to fix and you can't seem to crack the code on, and potentially say, let's just move this off to the side for now and replace it with something else. So I think that's a very good point.
And then there's one other point I want to make too, and that
Sure.
is one of the benefits of agile. And if you choose to implement the Scrum methodology and create Scrum teams, a huge benefit of taking that on is collaboration with your team, within your team. If you look at historically, marketing has been the waterfall, right? So you plan out a project plan, you have task A, then it goes to the next person. So you have your writer, then it goes to your designer, and everybody's working on different things, and they're not going to pick up that project until it comes to them. The benefit of agile, and that we have seen, and the key word here is when Mike, you were talking about sprints, it's truly a sprint. It's not just a monthly plan, but plan, prepare, make sure you have everything that you need, and then allow that core team to sprint together, to collaborate. The writer and the designer are working together, hand in hand at the same time. The developer is part of that. Whoever you have, whatever you're doing, whoever is going to be a piece of that pie and creating that marketing initiative for you, there are huge gains to allowing your team to go heads down, sprint, collaborate together, and it creates a better product. It creates better messaging work. You're going to be happier with the end result. And that again is another nuance that I don't think people really truly understand to Agile and Scrum, that when your team can really truly work together and really collaborate, have all of their heads in it together, your work is so much better.
I think that's a really good point, and I can give the audience a specific example of that. So if you rewind time, there was a period where Square 2 did not run on Agile, and we had designers doing work kind of on their own and then handing that work off to developers to build for clients. So the motion was something like this: designer sits down and designs a landing page, looks beautiful, sends it to the client. Client says, looks beautiful. We send it to the developer. They're like, well, this looks great, but this is going to take me twice as long to build as I was expecting it to take. Well, how is that? Well, you designed a beautiful page, but you didn't really take any development requirements into consideration. So like, I can build all this, but it's just going to take twice as long as I was expecting. It's going to take twice as long as we thought. The client really should pay double for this in order for us to do it. And then we had to go back to the client and say, hey, there's good news and bad news here. This beautiful page is going to cost us more to do it for you. You know, is that okay? Or do you want us to go back and do a simpler design that fits into your budget? So that's an awkward conversation, one that we don't really want to have. Today, the designer and the developer work together, to Kristen's point. They collaborate on the design so that the designer says to the developer says to the designer, like, yeah, don't do that. That's a really complicated piece of development work if that's how you intended the page to work. you can do this and it's much easier for me to develop it. It still looks just as good, still works just as good. But if you design it like that, I can develop it in the time frame that we originally agreed to. So again, if you have internal resources that are working separately, this is a great way to fix it. If you have, you may be doing the design work in-house and then passing it to an outside development company. Again, you're going to go over budget if you're not collaborating with them on what the design is expected to do and how that's going to impact development. And if you are working with an agency, you want to make sure that they're collaborating in the way we described, so you don't get surprised with extra expenses when things cost more than you thought they were going to. So that's a really practical example of what Kristen is talking about, and getting the team to collaborate within the Agile methodology provides a lot of efficiencies and eliminates a lot of those surprise costs and unexpected investment conversations. Okay, so here's another question. This is from John in San Diego. I only have autonomy over the marketing work. How do you suggest I get sales and customer service to engage in a monthly planning exercise around revenue? So it's a good question. And if I could read into his question a little bit, I think what he's saying is, how do I know how to prioritize those sales and customer service activities that I think are going to impact revenue when I don't have any control over those departments? And I would say the best way to do this, John, is to start talking to those other leaders about at least having a regular meeting with them around revenue. So I don't think you're really going to ever get them to do necessarily what you want to do. I don't think you're necessarily going to get much input on their priorities. But I do think if you sat down with them and said, look, we're all in this together, all three of our areas are responsible for revenue in some way. Let's start collaborating on what we're working on. Let's at least be aware of what each of us are working on. I think pretty quickly you would find that they want certain things from you, and you may be able to ask them for certain things too. So back to our very first point at the top of the show, if we're talking about sales ability to close new customers, you probably would have some awareness as to how effective that is, even in the marketing department, right? You know what the pace of new business is. You know when new customers are getting signed. You know whether that's on target or off target. If that's below expectations, you might want to have a conversation with the person running sales and say, hey, I noticed we're having trouble closing new customers. What can I do to help? And I have a feeling that there will definitely be some suggestions about what you can do to help, which again, doesn't get you any control over that, but it gets you in the conversation and it gets you involved in the solutions and the collaboration on what you can do differently. And it might be, let me give you guys a different presentation deck. It might be, let me help you with a reference reel because, you keep mentioning references are hard to come by. They're extending the sales cycle a couple of weeks. I have access to some customers that are happy to talk about how great we're doing. Let me do a quick video and I'll get it in the hands of the salespeople next week. That might help them close deals also. So I think that's probably your best bet. And I'm sure the customer service team will have similar ideas about how you might be able to help them. And all of them might have they might have some ideas about how they can help you. So I guess what I'm saying is start that collaboration simply. Hey guys, can we get together for an hour once a week and talk about how we're doing in our different departments? It might just spur some conversation or introduce some ideas in ways that we can do this better. That might be a nice small amount of time invested with three really important teams from a revenue perspective that might uncover some opportunities for you guys to collaborate and work together, which would definitely impact revenue. Kristen, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, again, just nuance, make it about them, right? So how can marketing better service sales and customer service? We need your feedback. How are the leads doing so that you'll get engagement, right? So if you're making it about making sure that you're delivering sales to right leads and that you're supporting them in the right way to help them close deals, there's no reason why they wouldn't want to engage with you. And then again, just to call out, Mike, what you were already saying, make those meetings about What is going on? What is the end result? How's the close rate? How are your sales qualified leads netting out? And not asking them, what can we do for you today? Or what are your needs? Because then you're just going to get a laundry list of, oh, can you give me a sales select here? Can you give me a presentation here? And that's not going to be effective or useful by then, but by having conversations about what is truly going on will help you uncover root cause and help you then better prioritize where you should focus your efforts.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there is so much more transparency into the performance of the revenue cycle these days. If you have a decent tech stack, you probably have access to the numbers you need to go to that meeting and say, hey, our sales cycle is 55 days. That's really long. Let's talk about how we can get it down to 45 days. Or our close rate is only 20%. That seems really low. Let's talk about how we can increase that. Even 10%, even 15% would have a major impact on revenue. You might have a little less visibility, but it's likely you'll have some visibility into the retention rate for customers too. Hey, we're losing customers 10% a month. Like, that seems high. What can we do to make them happier? What can we do to make our software stickier? What can we do to remind them to use the software better? Those are all really productive conversations based on data that I think people would be very open to. If people are not responding to data, you have a whole nother set of issues that probably require more senior level conversations about the people in the company and why they're not willing to respond to the specific metrics that have been uncovered by the transparency of our businesses in today's world. So some really good suggestions for you there that I think will help you get some traction pretty quickly. All right, Kristen. So I have another question here. This is from Fred in Wisconsin. He likes the prioritization methodology we're talking about, but his question is, how do I know what the impact or lift is going to be from individual projects? So I'm reading this as saying he wants to prioritize like we're talking about, but how is he going to know what the lift might be for some of the things on his list of things to do? You have any helpful insights for Fred here?
The lift is then going to depend, what are you doing with that? So you've prioritized creating an ebook on a certain topic. What are you going to do with that ebook? Do you already have a campaign out there that you're running and that you're going to add this ebook to? You can then fairly easily go in, look at your previous data. What are the world of people that you have been reaching? What have your results been to date? You're going to be adding this. You're going to be expanding your targeting. You can get metrics pretty easily to understand what you reasonably think you're going to get out of that asset. If it's going to also, in the ebook example, you're going to place it on perhaps a landing page or on your website. So you also have to take into consideration long-term, what are the optimization lifts it's going to add to your overall SEO strategy and building authority with your website. So there are the long-term lifts that you're going to accomplish as well. But you can simply create a list of, this is what we're focused on, this is how we're going to use it, and these are what we reasonably think can be expectations for the use of this in these different areas, A, B, C, D.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. To some extent, the more you do this, the better you'll get at it, right? So if this is the first time you're doing it, you might not know if you can take the landing page conversion rate, back to my previous example, from 20% to 40%. You might not know that, but by going into it with an objective and working towards that, that's a big piece of the puzzle already, right? You might say, like, look, I don't really know what changing the headline is going to do, but let's say it increases it by 5%, right? So that's it. You're expecting it to increase by 5%. You change the headlines around, you let it run long enough to get enough data points to see how you're doing. And you basically ran an experiment, you did a test, and you have some data. So did you do better? Then next time you're going to make a change, be a little more aggressive. Did you do worse? The next time you're going to make a change, be a little more conservative. Did you hit it right on the head? Then you did a pretty good job guesstimating. what you thought it was going to be, and start from there, right? You know, Kristen's right. If you do have